Consider a shipwreck, a vessel rent to splinters on the ragged coast of the Ironlands. Consider a survivor washed ashore. This is Kynan, and he is not a good man. Stone Ridge, the nearby village, offered shelter and found only ruin as a reward for its deeds of honor. A victim in a cycle of revenge that sticks to Kynan like a twisted shroud. This is Kynan, and he is a killer. The call of vengeance draws him further north, away from these bloody shores. An unlikely traveling companion by his side, Kynan finds himself at the edge of the southern wilds, a last true refuge of the firstborn, of great beasts and older things. This is where he must persevere, if he is to have any hope of sealing his unfinished business. And yet, it might be better for the world, perhaps, if the ancient, unbroken woods were to simply swallow him. This is Kynan, and he is on the move.
Hey, how are ya? I'm Anderson. Welcome to Chapter 2 of Kill 10 Rats Plays Ironsworn. It's been a couple of days since last we checked in with Saskia and Kynan. They are no longer in the village of Stone Ridge. They've put their considerable salvager skill to use while the village was still in disarray, liberated a few supplies, a frame to carry their provisions, and they headed out north almost as soon as the turmoil started to die down. They didn't quite sneak off without any parting words, but Bastian wasn't exactly in a shape where he would have had much to say to them, particularly Saskia, so they left. They left him to his funeral preparations, they left the villagers to their cleanup, and they left behind the procession drawing off into the distance, carrying Shona to her destiny. Now, since we're effectively heading into a completely fresh start, fresh chapter here with a different area to explore, I've decided to reset the momentum. I've decided to reset the health, spirit, and supply counters to reflect not only the fact that they managed to resupply, but also the fact that they would have withdrawn from the village to make camp somewhere on that elevated, grassy, rocky terrain that is up above Stone Ridge, up above those cliffs, the actual dry land, well, considerably drier than Stone Ridge anyway. And even though they would have had to contend with some unpleasant weather, they would at least have the resources to create themselves a little camp, a lean-to, some windbreak in a little grove of trees, and rest up for a day and a night before pushing forward. And push forward they have, because they're now coming up through those rocky, almost canyons, onto the edge of a forest, a very abrupt forest edge, a very towering forest edge, because between them and their next destination lies the deep wilds. Now, before we head on in there, I've also decided to allocate 1 mark of progress to find Kaladas and make him pay, and 2 marks to find Siora's remains and lay her to rest, because, well, we have managed to consolidate the position of Kynan after the shipwreck. He has managed to resupply, he has managed to even find a unforeseen traveling companion. So I figured that would be well adequate to reflect that, even though it probably should have come way earlier, because we did effectively preoccupy ourselves with 1 chapter that didn't exactly get us more than a single step closer to our background vow. Now, during what would effectively be the first 36 to 48 hours together, I don't imagine Saskia and Kynan did much life story swapping or anything of the sort. Their exchanges were more of a practical nature, and there was never really a verbal agreement or acknowledgement of the bond that was formed. Just an unspoken understanding that they have a common goal, and that is to get out of there and to get away from that place of bad memories and misfortune. And for them that is enough. They've already had that little bit of unspoken rapport since they first laid eyes on each other during that initial standoff in Stone Ridge. And one thing to note maybe is that Saskia now looks somewhat changed. She got swept through that unleashed flood of the primordial, basically dunked in water, and that has, well, ruined her initial disguise. She no longer has that black and white ash and paint all over her body. It's more like she looks like a regular sellsword brigand now, with her mismatched armor and ash blonde hair, and no longer this war paint except for some smudges here and there. But as they walk, as they tend to each other's wounds and set a snare for a rabbit and make camp together, there is not a lot of that wariness. There is, well, not exactly trust, but they were both pretty much of the opinion that there's not really any bad blood between them. They're not the type, really. I think they both understand why each of them did what they did. And so they're not really watching their backs when the other is like, you know, walking behind no more than they would with any other person. They are to some extent comfortable in each other's company. They're good traveling companions now, but they have a challenge ahead of them. They are now at the forest edge, and if we consider the map from the intro, there is quite a bit of forest in between them and, well, what passes for civilization further north. So it'll be a challenge they have to meet together now. Now, before we go any further, let's just refresh our memories about the Deep Wilds. They are somewhat fleshed out in the rulebook, and the features as described here are unbroken woodlands, a thick canopy casts the forest floor in shadow, lingering fog, constant rains, elves ever watchful, ancient trees hung with moss, streams winding their way through rough terrain, skittering and growls from out of the mist. So this is Firstborn territory. Is it likely that Kynan will run into his firstborn contact, this Hulata, in this particular area? Probably not, because as we picture Kynan's past, that took place a lot farther north. So I don't think it's likely that Hulata is also kicking around down here, but the dice may disagree, so let's see where this goes. And unfortunately as well, for the purposes of advancement, I'm not quite furnished enough with experience points to turn Saskia into an asset card, into a companion. And I also think she might be a little bit too temporary for this. I'm not sure she's gonna stick around forever, unless maybe Kynan and her uncover who that mutual enemy of theirs is that they still don't know about. But for the moment, I'm holding on to these experience points. Maybe I have a chance to spend them on Saskia, and maybe something else will come up, so we'll see. But for the moment, let's put ourselves in a Deep Wilds frame of mind and rejoin Kynan and Saskia as they stand on some exposed rock protruding from the grassy ground in the rain, peering into these dense, towering trees with the mist still clinging to the treetops, slowly receding. It's still early in the day, and Saskia's voice rings out.
Well, this looks inviting.
About as inviting as a summons to your own execution.
Cheerful, my.
These woods, they get worse the farther north you go.
North, how encouraging. Remind me, which direction are we headed?
And Kynan says nothing for a while and scoffs. And eventually, he says, east.
Oh?
We stick to the tree line. We're about as far south as these woods go. We can go around.
That will extend our journey.
It will extend our lives. And that's the plan that Kynan came up with, or rather I came up with on behalf of Kynan when I looked at the map, because it did look like there's a bit of a tree break, rocky something that connects the deep wilds and the ragged coast to a corridor towards the hinterlands. Now the question, of course, is will they be able to stick to the tree line? Because I would imagine these deep wilds as a place where you can easily get lost. So fortunately for us, we have moves to support us in understanding whether this works out easily or whether we get lost in the woods and have ourselves a little bit of another sidetrack adventure here. Now, let's prepare ourselves to undertake a journey, and for that we also need a progress bar. When you travel across hazardous or unfamiliar lands, first set the rank of your journey. Troublesome, dangerous, formidable, extreme, or epic. I feel like this is a formidable journey with 1 progress per waypoint. This is going to be a longer trek before they are able to reach any kind of civilization again. I think this tree line path is probably something that the villagers pointed out in form of Bastion when they were planning that trading journey before Saskia and her people attacked. So that's how Kynan has an inkling that this is also a path that leads to another settlement. He will also probably know the name of that settlement, so let's, as we formulate reaching that destination, let's find out what that settlement is called. We are heading towards 31 Red Crest. Are we okay with just Red Crest, or do we want another word in there? I think we're okay with Red Crest. So we are traveling to Red Crest, and it is a formidable journey. Travel to Red Crest. This means every waypoint we make 1 progress before we can reach our destination by means of a roll. For each segment of our journey, roll plus wits. If we're setting from a community with which we share a bond, not quite. So let us go. Plus wits does not sound extremely encouraging to me, considering Kynan's wits is not his outstanding feature. But he does manage to score a weak hit, which means what exactly? You reach a waypoint and mark progress but suffer -1 supply. We already lose 1 supply, but we can also probably like resupply and things. Let's switch over to Lodestar, because that has a better time staying open. So we mark 1 progress, and let's figure out what this milestone is that we find. So we do have a location oracle that we can make use of, and a location descriptor that we can use to add extra details. So let's maybe go with that before we put it into action and focus to understand what's going on in this place. So what location do we run into? 61, a thicket. Let's get ourselves a descriptor. 20, contested. A contested thicket. Let's get ourselves a few more details. Let's get ourselves action and theme. 37, hunt. Okay. And 48, dead. Hunt dead. Does that sound like this thicket is the hideout of somebody who is being hunted over dead, and they'll not be extremely happy of 2 armed strangers rocking up, and might just get the very wrong idea of why they're passing through there? Let's think about this some more. Who is this fugitive? Let's go with a 26 plus 4. Is it an Ironlander? So is it an Ironlander? 94, most definitely an Ironlander. So let's get ourselves an Ironlander name. 61, Erin or Rana. I like Erin. And let's get ourselves some characteristics. 87, religious. Okay. 27, aggressive. And let's see if we can find a fitting character goal here. 47, secure provisions. Not sure how much of a character goal that really is. I mean, yeah, base level survival, but almost taking that for granted a little bit. What's 74? defend a place. Okay. I think in light of all of these, I'm getting the picture of somebody who is maybe tired of running, who is very much at home in these woods and has perhaps an almost religious connection to these deep wilds, to this forest. One of the rare humans who take to the Ironlands on a more spiritual level and imbue their own sense of the land with almost like a personality perspective, who have more of a druidic view of things. So Erin is in this place to evade being hunted over this unspecified debt, but she's not gonna relinquish this place. She's not gonna run from it. This thicket is her sanctuary where she communes with the land and the spirit of the trees and the sky, because she feels there is a connection there that runs deeper and that she shares with the firstborn, who may or may not be in this area. I think we're quite at the edge still. Maybe wandered in a little bit too deep to evade a rocky outcropping that pushes Kynan and Saskia off the path of the edge of the forest and deeper in, where they have to wait for the impassable terrain to come down and make it possible to avoid it, walk past it, walk around it. As they come upon this thicket, and seeing the trees go denser and the undergrowth bushes coming closer together and covering the path, the makeshift path that they're following, Saskia and Kynan have to weigh the option of, are we going even further around now and make a second turn around and then eventually perhaps lose our way entirely, or do we try to push through into this thicket? And that's what they decide to do. So I'm gonna have to roll face danger now with, I think, wits to see whether there are any defensive measures put in place by Erin. That's a weak hit, which means we face a troublesome cost, but we succeed. So as Kynan and Saskia hack into the branches and push through and try to move these obstacles out of their way, and as they're hacking away at the trees and branches and pushing through the undergrowth, trying but failing to keep the sound down, it's just inevitable here. If you want to push through there, you're gonna make some noise. Kynan steps out through a overgrown obstacle in his path and has a brief realization of having made it through to a more cleared, less obstructed space, when a thick branch comes rushing at his head, triggered by his stepping on a few vines knotted together on the ground, and he manages to turn out of the way and doesn't get hit right in the middle of his face, but just catches the brunt on the side of his arm and has to endure harm. So we're rolling plus iron, or rather, actually we're rolling plus health because that's higher. And we actually strong hit, which means we can shake it off for a negative momentum. How much health will we actually be losing here? I'm gonna say 2, because it's a person, a dangerous person, so I would imagine her defense measures are also on the level of an attack by a dangerous foe. So we have the option to drop down to plus 3 or to take 1 momentum loss and drop down to plus 4. I think I'm gonna go with that. So momentum is down to plus 1, health is down to plus 4. As Kynan grits his teeth and now looks around with his sword out, about at the same time as he hears Saskia emit an outcry of her own and sees her doubled over a few meters to the side, having made her own way through the undergrowth and having taken one of these defensive measures right to the stomach, knocking the wind out of her. And Kynan now sees a little makeshift path, at least a more well-trodden part of the undergrowth in front of them, that leads almost like a tunnel with canopy and leaves and just the thick vegetation overhead, forming almost like a roof further into this thicket. And I think Erin is somewhere here lurking and probably of a mind to pick them off. So they're still on the back foot. They don't see the hidden potential attacker, giving her an opportunity to fire an arrow. So let's reflect this little ambush by facing danger again. And we are off to a... Oh boy. Off to an interesting start. We're having a complication on top of a disastrous result. Let's actually pay the price through the pay the price table and see what that gets us. 57, it causes a delay or puts you at a disadvantage. I think I need a little bit more interpretation help here, and I'm gonna go with the oracles again. So action, 28, investigate. 59, rumor. That almost sounds like the premise of a vow, investigate a rumor. I could think of maybe giving Erin some kind of hold, or rather maybe an initial advantage over Kynan and Saskia that makes her able to extract the promise. That's what creates the delay in the journey, so they have to do something else first. Let me roll for settlement trouble real quick, just to establish some kind of direction. 23, nature strikes back. Okay. Now, is this happening to Redcrest as the nearest bigger settlement, or is this a different settlement? Let's go with 50-50. 51 plus is Redcrest. We have a religious woods person drawn into the forest who wants to defend this place and is hunted for a debt. We have nature striking back, being the trouble in Redcrest. I get a sense that this somehow has something to do with Erin, and that the rumor investigation might concern the current state of things, of the backlash of Redcrest, or maybe the backlash of the natural forces. Now, how does that translate into Kynan having just stepped out of a bush, gotten smacked in the shoulder, well, in the arm for a change? I'm just used to having him take damage in the shoulder at this point. Kynan getting smacked in the arm and now being the victim of a complication of a face danger roll. I think what we have here is a moment where Kynan just touches his neck briefly and thinks various swear words of displeasure at now being stung by some kind of insect, and he's about to take the next step inward and focus on the path ahead when his vision starts to blur and fade, and he catches himself gargling, trying to formulate a word, but he just topples forward into darkness. Now, I think I'm gonna need another Ironlander name here for the next step. Let me just quickly get one. 19, Farina or Asha. I'm gonna go with Asha because I actually know Farina. And what do we need the name for? Well, Kynan wakes up with a hell of a headache. He pries his eyes open, unsure of how long he's been out. And even though he wakes up to mostly darkness, even that little light from a burned down campfire a few meters away causes him intense pain. He's very light sensitive. It shoots through his head, through his brain, and down his spine, making him groan briefly, and therefore also alerting the other two people in his presence to his semi-awakened state. And as his vision starts to adjust and he forces himself to peer into the murk, he can see Saskia sitting on a log in front of the burned down fire, in front of a cast iron pot with a wooden bowl, and apparently shoveling some sort of stew into her mouth. And off on the far side of the fire of the iron pot, in this apparently small cave, he can make out the distorted, shadowed features of a woman, perhaps in her 60s, 70s, somewhere pretty far up in Ironlander terms. And she's also eating. But she's got a pretty beady stare focused at Kynan. And we've got Saskia there putting the bowl down, looking over at Kynan. Kynan, so good of you to join us. Have you met Erin? And Kynan just sits up, getting dizzy and looking around for his weapons and his pack is there, and his sword seems to be standing lean against the wall behind Saskia. And he starts to talk, but instead turns to the side and retches up the meager contents of his stomach. Aaron just keeps staring at him, not really reacting, and he wipes his mouth and spits. That was a pretty effective poison. Mushrooms? And the old woman's eyes twitch for a moment as she smirks. Doesn't say anything, but Kynan takes that as a yes. He's probably been on the receiving end of this kind of thing before. Probably also used it himself.
A little bit more than just mushrooms, they just put you under. But the rest of this little brew would have put you away for good. Fortunately, ever the good hostess, Erin could be persuaded to provide you with the antidote.
Kynan rubs this inflamed spot on his neck and clears his head. How generous. Entirely free of charge, I assume.
Oh, of course. She's only interested in, let's say, a little bit of gratitude, so I made her a promise.
And Kynan can already kind of see where this is going, because it's become a bit of a pattern in his life that he also has to make some promises to people that he doesn't necessarily want to make promises to. And what promise is that?
You see, Erin hails from Redcrest, and she's very interested in the current goings-on in her former home.
And with that, Saskia elaborates a little bit and outlines that this Erin is an outcast from Redcrest, hiding out here, even though she probably wouldn't put it quite that way. But she keeps tabs on the area nearby through her own scoutings and exchanging information, perhaps with the Firstborn or with travelers that she meets a little farther away from her home. And through this traveler rumor mill, she's learned that Redcrest has problems with the forest edge, with perhaps the Firstborn, perhaps some kind of natural phenomenon, but it's something that Erin alludes to Saskia, that she had a hand in before she was cast out, before she fled, potentially. And in those rumors, while she's also always listening for hunters, she is also always keeping an ear to the ground for Asha, her daughter. And having learned from Saskia that they're traveling to Redcrest, she bids them to swear to her that they will check in with Asha, but also ensure her safety. So if Asha has a problem, to assess the situation as two capable warriors and potentially spirit her away out of town and back to this thicket, or at least give her the means to reach this thicket. So that's the Iron Vow we swear now. We call it Dangerous. And we swear to find Asha and keep her safe. And as Saskia finishes her explanations of the conversation she had with Erin while Kynan was out, he sighs and picks up his iron hoop and swears to find Asha and keep her safe. Let's see if we can actually heal here, because we're kind of in a place where we can rest up, and we took a little bit of damage, so with a weak hit and down to 0 momentum, we can do that. Now I think we better find a way to regain some momentum, but it's a pretty good reflection of this, sidetracking, and I'm being made to swear another vow, and getting poisoned and put under and put out of action, and now feeling like hungover after a 3-night bender without the benefit of actually getting to drink the alcohol. And the next morning, without Kynan ever hearing Erin utter as much as a word, they set forth again. That is a progress at the cost of another supply. Let's see where we end up. I think I'm gonna go with action and theme first, just to get a general idea. 64 acquire. 37 vow. Acquire vow. No, we're not doing another one. No, we're not doing another one. I refuse. A 73 memory, acquire memory. Oh god, I'm drawing a blank here. Let's go up and down a line. So it could be world, it could be protection, acquire protection. Maybe that's it. We find a safe place to rest and make camp. Yeah. Yeah, we can make camp. We can do the make camp move. We roll plus supply and see what we're getting. We are getting a strong hit, which means we can take 2 of the beneficial results. One is to take plus health. We can take plus spirit, we can take plus momentum, or we can take +1 to the next undertake journey. I think we're going to take the plus momentum and the +1 for undertaking a journey. So Kynan and Saskia managed to find their way back to the forest edge after parting with Aaron, wandering through lighter vegetation with the open territory occasionally coming into view before they're being pushed back again by just the impassable terrain. And as dusk falls, they find a very suitable rock face with an overhang that almost forms like half a natural roof, with the other half being formed by the canopy of the trees, and they make camp sheltered from the constant pouring rain, sheltered from the wind. They get a fire going, they catch a rabbit, they have some food, and they manage to establish a little bit of that confidence that was a little bit destroyed by getting put out by an old woman. So let us break camp and undertake a journey with +1. That does not put us in strong hit territory, so we suffer another supply loss and make another progress. Let's check in with the oracles again. Maybe action and theme again. We can roll up a location if we feel like we need one and it doesn't present itself through the oracles already. 75 fortify, 06 safety. Okay. Let's get ourselves a location. 66 a valley. Okay, so being given the choice to stray into the trees and keeping the trees sort of above and dipping down into a valley besides the forest edge, Kynan chooses to travel towards the low ground. Especially given the time of day that they reach it, it's still daylight out, and he clings to the higher ground for a moment, spotting like the thickets down there, the underbrush, because there is vegetation. It's just not as thick and primal as the actual deep wild forest. And he thinks it's a very good and safe spot to camp out. So fortify safety again. But I think he also considers it a good spot to catch a few, well, not a few, one, to catch a deer as it emerges from bedding down for the day and makes for the grass and bushes at the edge of the thickets that they spend the day in. And so he takes out his bow and makes a few plans for some likely ways of approaching the spots that deer might congregate in, and he hunts. So let's make a hunt move. That is that's a positive match. So hell yeah. Kynan hunts successfully and he gets some kind of benefit from it. What would that be? 85 construct, 79 revenge. It's another odd pairing, construct revenge. What's 97? Wealth. Okay. So I assume that what we're having here is a successful hunt, maybe an extraordinarily successful hunt. So he brings down a buck in his prime, managing to sneak up on it in the lee of the wind as the buck and a few doe come forward from a thicket of trees into a underbrush of fragrant bushes and tall grass, and he manages to approach to within about 40-50 meters of it before he lets the arrow fly, and it just starts briefly, takes a few steps but immediately collapses. He doesn't have to chase it, he has to track it. He just brings it down with one clean shot, and he manages to forage a lot of meat from it, a lot of material, the horn, the sinews, leaving them out to dry near the fire for the night as they make camp there. And to reflect that, I'm just gonna take one more supply than I would be entitled to, and we can move forward. That is another weak hit, so we make progress again up to 4 now, and we get to figure out what happens next. Guards, that's 08. 98, home. Maybe we come upon a lone homestead. Where would this be located? Are we still at the forest edge or further in? 74, river. Okay, we have a homestead by a river. That puts me in mind of like a fisher homestead. It's a remote one. So there's probably more than just one person or one family living there. I'm picturing more like a handful of like A-frame houses sunk into the ground, close to the river, with a few simple boats moored nearby. Maybe even a few people visible doing chores and tasks around the village. And I think I'm just gonna roll secure an advantage with Shadow, because I think Kynan and Saskia want to sneak past and not be seen. So let's try and avoid being spotted by these fisher folk and see if we can take some advantage from that. That is a strong hit because Kynan is really good at sneaking. So we're gonna get a +1 on the next move, and we are going to undertake a journey. And that's actually a strong hit for a change, the way it looks. So we are marking progress without paying supplies, or we can mark progress and take 1 momentum for the cost of 1 supply. I think we're gonna do that actually, so let's go back to +2 momentum and down to +3 supply. Location, send me location, brother. 43, a pass. Okay, so we're taking the high ground. What do we find? 33, aid. 96, relationship. I think we're gonna make camp in this pass again. So we are slowly moving eastwards along the forest edge, and again being presented with the option to veer into the forest or to follow the slow ascent of the country as it moves towards that elevation, that little small mountain range or set of hills that cuts through the deep wilds farther east that Kynan wants to reach to make the way north. They go up into these rocky hillsides and find a pass through one of them that is more easily traversable while still keeping the forest edge in sight and not being brought too far off course. And dusk falls again and they make camp. That is a weak hit. We can choose 1. I think we can take the momentum, and in terms of the aid relationship, maybe this is now the time where Saskia and Kynan around the campfire start exchanging some stories of their past, of their origins, and that maybe gives Kynan a chance to stumble upon that mutual enemy of theirs, to latch onto a mention there and find out what they actually have in common. I think I'm gonna do gather information for that, just for him to engage with Saskia. We share a bond, so that's a +1. See how this goes. That's 4 + 2 wits +1 for the bond. That's a weak hit. On a weak hit, the information complicates your quest or introduces a new danger. Envision what you discover, ask Oracle if unsure, and take +1 momentum. We take the +1 momentum, and we note that Kynan learns of the common enemy, but it's complicated. And what that complication is, we're gonna find out next time. So thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you then, and bye for now.